With Roe v. Wade potentially on the verge of being overturned, a question has sparked intense debate in that media world. Should journalists be allowed to participate in protests or even to say what they think publicly? Axios Media's chief executive, Jim Vandehei, sent a note to his staff this week where he prevented Axios's employees from taking part in any demonstrations. He said, quote, "Abortion is a human rights issue that has become a highly politicized topic with very specific policies being debated in Washington and in most states, so it seems impossible to march or tweet opinions and not be perceived as picking a political side in public." Come on. Now, Axios allowed its staff to participate in the demonstrations following the murder of George Floyd, which highlights a stunning inconsistency in the company's policy. Vandehei argued that the difference with those protests was that they represented a unique moment in American history where everyone was standing together. But look, he isn't alone. Most mainstream media entities say the same thing. Your views represent our views, and we want to be seen as objective. But of course, what's really happening is that Axios, and certainly all the legacy media companies, don't want their employees going to pro-choice rallies. This is not a two-sided issue inside most newsrooms in America. And they want to be able to say, though, that they're being objective. I get it. This is what journalists claim to do. But the larger issue here for me is that these reporters are being ordered not to be transparent with their readers or viewers. They are overwhelmingly pro-choice and don't want to admit it publicly, so they can still claim, I'm not taking a side here, I'm just unbiased, I'm just being objective. I give credit to Noah Shachtman, the editor of Rolling Stone, who told his staff, quote, "Unlike so many other newsrooms, you don't have to stifle your beliefs around here. This is a place where we can champion our convictions, where we can be our fullest selves. Of course, we have to maintain the highest standards of accuracy and authenticity in our reporting. We can't take shortcuts or substitute opinions for facts. But this is a multi-pronged offensive against our rights, and we need to be frank with our readers about what's at stake. No euphemisms, no sugarcoating." Good for him. No sugarcoating. They will let their readers know that they strongly oppose overturning Roe v. Wade and let the readers decide what they want to do with it. The news is reported by human beings. Human beings have opinions, biases. If media consumers know where the person delivering their news is coming from on a given issue, there are no hidden biases. And then consumers can decide how they should receive that particular information. If the media entity wants to be balanced, they should have people covering it who come from differing perspectives, not just reporters pretending to be objective. Look, I do believe that many journalists try very hard to be fair, but I don't know that's good enough. Transparency, I thought, was the foundation upon which journalism is supposedly built, except when it applies to them. And then there's this pretend, showy lack of transparency about the personal beliefs of reporters. And to me, that is a big part of why the public's trust in media has eroded so much. Joining me now is Frank Sesno, former CNN Washington bureau chief and the director of strategic initiatives at George Washington University's School of Media and Public Affairs. Frank, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Appreciate it. All right, am I getting this one wrong in your view?
I'm not sure that you're getting it wrong, but I'm not sure that you're putting all the nuance in that belongs either. I think that without any question, when it comes to people who are writing columns, who are sharing their opinion, who've got an attitude, they should be transparent about that. And if they want to go to a protest, that's fine. But Dan, I think that different news organizations are going to make different decisions for themselves. They each have their own ethos and culture, and they can stand for what they want. So as you point out, Rolling Stone says, go for it. We're going to be completely transparent, participate, that's fine. Okay, their audience knows that. You read their copy, and that's a fine thing. The New York Times, NPR, the Associated Press, CNN, lots of other news organizations, and I study their ethics guides, I study their standards and practices because I teach that in a thing called journalism ethics, which is not an oxymoron, I think, say, no, you cannot be out there and be both an advocate and an activist and be perceived as a fair reporter. Now, you may say, well, wait a minute, everybody's got an opinion, everybody comes from someplace, and that's true, but people who are well-trained are also trained to put those opinions to the side when they're doing their work, just as a judge, a good judge, is going to put his or her opinions to the side to preside over a fair trial, or a juror, if you're that person, is going to, we hope, be able to stand back and say, show me the evidence, regardless of what I may think. I'm going to try to be fair about this.
See, the problem is that, you're making the point about, New York Times, NPR, Washington Post. I think you'd agree with me, right, that 90-something% of the people there, if they were going to state their opinions, would say that they support Roe versus Wade.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I would certainly agree with you that it would be the majority.
A vast, vast majority. And so when they're being instructed not to share their views, what that means is don't go to pro-choice rallies, don't talk about what your view is online. And to me, what that does is it creates a dishonesty. And you say that they're trained to do it, and you say that their role is not to be advocates. But for some of these people, they feel so strongly about these issues that you can say that they are going to try not to allow that to infect their reporting. I would rather them be honest and say, this is where I stand. I am going to try to be very objective here. But for those same people who want to go out there and they want to protest, and I'm not mocking that in any way, I'm saying those same people, we are saying of them, we're going to trust you to be objective because you have been trained to do that. That's a very hard thing to ask the public to do.
But that's what a good journalist does. That's what a good editor does. If they don't do that, they should lose their job. If they can't do that, they should at a minimum recuse themselves from their story. When I was a bureau chief, I wrote a note to my correspondents at one point, and I said, when you're live on the air, please try to avoid 2 words. I think. The audience doesn't actually care what you think. The audience cares what you have seen, what you have heard, what you have witnessed, what you can report. If somebody feels so strongly about something that they want to be at a rally, they're entitled to do that, but then they should recuse themselves from the reporting.
But they don't. But that. As a practical matter, they don't. It doesn't happen. Oh, come on.
But if they don't...
Have you heard of any mainstream journalist in America recusing themselves from the Roe versus Wade story because they feel so passionately about it?
I think it's like any other story. But, we have this conversation, and it's a really interesting conversation. It's a difficult one.
It is.
If you're gay, should you not cover, or should you cover?
No, you should be able to cover it.
Right? If you're a smoker, should you not cover stories about tobacco?
Absolutely not. You should just be able to disclose that if you feel strongly about it. It doesn't have to be what your personal lifestyle is if you don't want to share that. But if you have a very strong opinion on a particular story, I think that you should disclose it. I think I try and do that. I do just the opposite of what you advised. What you advised back at CNN. I always start with, I think. This is where I believe.
Okay, but it's an important distinction, Dan, because that's where you are, that's where this program is, that's where this network is.
That's true.
That's what you said you stand for, and your audience likes that, and your audience understands that.
But it's about transparency. But it's about transparency.
And that's important, transparency. And I believe in transparency too, complete transparency. But I also believe that it is possible. You're a parent, your kid comes home at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're furious, right? Your kid says, let me explain. Do you let him explain? Do you set that anger to the side for just a minute? People have that capacity. And if they can't, back to the news organization again, if they feel so strongly about something that their opinions are going to pollute their copy, pollute their judgment, then they should be taken off the story or put on the opinion page. Yeah. Part of the problem we've got, Dan, is that we've blurred the distinction so much between fact and opinion, commentary and analysis, that the audience says, I don't trust you. No wonder they don't.
Right. But the reason they don't trust the media isn't because the media entities haven't drawn these defined lines. It's because the journalists have been dishonest. That's the problem. And I think that's what you're minimizing here, is the level of dishonesty on the part of a good number of journalists who pretend to be objective when they let their biases seep into everything that they write. You get the final word.
That's a very strong word, dishonesty. And if there's any journalist who's been dishonest...
Intellectual dishonesty.
And if they... Okay, but it's still a strong term, and fair enough. Go for it. But if someone is being intellectually dishonest like that, they shouldn't be doing that job. They shouldn't be on that assignment. Take them off. We are still training today young people who want to be journalists and how to go out in a very difficult story, whether it's a crime, whether it's a war, whether it's something like this that is ugly, horrible, hateful, and try to be able to bring that story with some degree of balance and perspective to the audience without putting themselves in it personally.
Yeah. I mean, look, I used to be a real journalist, and I have to say that I've lost a lot of faith in it. But Frank,
and I agree with you. I agree with that. Yeah. I have too. And one of the reasons I've lost faith is because so many news organizations have gone helter-skelter toward mixing this stuff up. I almost slipped there. Be careful. Yeah. And mixing this stuff up and confusing the audience for the sake of clicks or ratings or something else. We have a public service.
Frank says no. Always appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.